Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tara.
Greetings, citizens, you damn dirty apes.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We talk about science fiction films. We watch some movie, we get together, we talk about it. It's that simple. We started the Planet of the Apes franchise about a month or so ago with the original, of course, and we're here to go into movie number 2 in that franchise, and that is Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers and start, dissecting the actual plot details that you may want to miss before you watch it. And while everyone knows the ending of the original Planet of the Apes, I feel like almost no one knows what this movie's about unless you happen to have seen it, because no one talks about the sequels really. So here we are, and we're going to discover, and we've both seen this before. This was not a first viewing for either of us, but I'd forgotten a lot of it, to be honest. I remembered some broad strokes. I did not remember what the final moments of the film. I was legitimately surprised when it got to the ending, and that was the ending. Obviously, more than that.
Pretty big ending.
Yes. So we'll get there. Where did we start with this? I suppose. I mean, basically, another astronaut lands on the planet, which I guess we can. I mean, there's no spoilers for this movie, but I guess for the purpose of talking about this, though, we have to address the fact that the ending of the original, did reveal a big thing, which now we're supposed to know throughout the whole film. So spoilers for the first one, just in case. But we're on Earth. We know it's Earth. We're on Earth with these apes in the future, and this other ship arrives carrying Brent. His crew members are already dead. Although one's like dying as the movie starts, but he's here. He's our knockoff Taylor, and honestly, the first thing I suppose we can talk about, maybe in a minute after we get the general impressions, is why we have someone who's not Charlton Heston for most of the movie. There's some behind the scenes reasons for that, so we'll get into it. But yeah, basically he meets up with Nova and ends up wanting to try and escape himself, and they end up encountering we'll just call him a third party in the underground of the Planet of the Apes, another society of sorts. And that raises some interesting questions, adds some sci-fi nonsense to the whole thing, maybe even some goofiness, depending on your...
What?
We'll get to it. We'll discuss it. So that's the gist of it. I'm being very broad strokes here, because I don't want to get into what the society that they find are, because that's kind of a big deal and where the film takes a big turn. So, Tara, what is your general feelings? And given your almost offended reaction to me even suggesting that something in this was a little bit silly, I think I might know the answer to this, but what is your general opinion of Beneath the Planet of the Apes?
Yeah, I think I gave Planet of the Apes, the first one, a 10 out of 10. So it's almost impossible to follow up with a second masterpiece. And they don't. It's fun to watch, but it's not very good. But it is really fun to watch.
After the Sphere review, I was really worried you were going to actually say this is another 10. Stay tuned till the end for the actual score, of course. But
which will be, I don't know, maybe more positive than you think. But it's hard to explain this film. I have a lot of nostalgia for it because I do love all of these films. Like, I've said that already, I'll say it again. I love all of these original films. They all have something that is special. And this one, I think, might be the weirdest one. And it might actually be like the weakest of the sequels. But it just gets so weird and so like into the bizarre that I have to applaud it.
This movie to me feels like, so first of all, you had your star who didn't really want to come back, and they talked him into paying, I don't know if they paid him the same amount as the first movie or even more for his, limited screen time, but I assume they paid him a lot.
Yeah, because the first movie was a huge hit.
Yeah. So they paid him a lot just to show up a little bit. He's kind of just missing for most of the film. You see a bit more of his journey from the end of the first one at the start in a montage, and then basically from there he's missing until very near the end. So Heston's gone, and that's why we have a second lead. So we have a whole second lead, which in and of itself presents the problem of, another astronaut, team landed on the planet. So there's a bit of that sequel just repeating some things. And I think the movie boils down to two halves for me. the first half is doing a rush version of the first movie again, because Brent has to learn everything that we already know and what Taylor learned over the course of the first movie. So we get at how he first learns about the apes, how he learns stuff that we found out in the first one, the reveal of the planet, all that. And because of that, it feels very sequely in that we're just kind of doing a lot of the same beats. We're rushing them a little bit, and and they're not as exciting by any means. And then the second half of the movie, it's like, well, where do we go with this? What are we doing in this second movie? What's the point of this second movie? And it was almost like they picked just some, I don't want to say completely random, but they just, what sort of crazy other thing could we put on the planet that loosely ties in thematically to one thing about this franchise? Just one thing, right. One element. And that's how we get the society that we find in the second half of the film. And it's a very weird structure of film because of that, because it doesn't, like, I wouldn't say this movie has a 3-act structure at all. I would say it's kind of this weird 2-half kind of thing. Arguably, the second half kind of has a structure, but it's very odd because
it's like watching a 2-parter Star Trek series.
Yeah, and even the sets, especially in the second half, the sets feel, they're a bit bigger budget, but they feel very reminiscent of a Star Trek original series episode. Like all the underground sets, they have that kind of fake quality to them, which, don't get me wrong, it's a movie of its time. I'm not necessarily going to dog it points for that, but
yeah,
it adds
there's
to
a lot of paintings in it also, like matte paintings that you can't, but I like that look. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like, I have no childhood attachment to this. I never watched this as a kid. I never saw any of them until I was in my late teens when I bought the box set or whatever. I think I bought the first one on its own, then I bought the box set later because I want to see the sequels. What are the sequels like? In fact, no. Now I think about it, I never had the sequels in DVD. I bought the box set on Blu-ray. I didn't see the sequels till the Blu-ray set came out. Probably like 2009, 2010, something like that. So I have no like attachment from my youth to these movies, and I watched this one, and I knew a little bit about it. Like I'd heard, some of the beats, not all of them, but some of them. And
most people know about the society.
Yeah,
I think
it's just kind of a weird movie. It's very much the Freddy's Revenge of Planet of the Apes, and not just because it's the second one, but just in that it feels like it's got this weird direction that it never really goes back to. Like the rest of the sequels all feel more, if not in style with the first movie, at least once they established the new style in the third one, they kind of keep it going naturally from there. So, 4's not a sharp left turn, 5's not a sharp right turn. They're kind of, it feels like a sort of knock-on sequential story from that point. This one it follows on from some of the first stuff, but it really feels like the ending of the first one kind of put them in this corner, and we just have to think of something to do, and that's what this movie is. So
I totally agree.
And that's why it's kind of insane. It's the insanity of it's just like, oh, we had to think of something, so this is what we thought of.
But it is like super bizarre. Like right away, there's some magic going on. Like you don't really understand what's happening, and it's odd because it opens with the closing scene of Planet of the Apes, and it's like a pretty long scene too. Yeah,
it starts from the speech of I think it's Cornelius reading out the thing about man. Man's the devil, blah blah blah. And part the cynical part of me is like, because this movie's only 95 minutes, and this was like 5 minutes of the first movie at the start. I'm like, this is padding out the runtime a little bit, replaying all of this to such an extent.
Yeah, it's like last time on Planet of the Apes.
Previously on Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and it does pick up right from there. Like we get Heston on a horseback with Nova, but yeah, it's. I mean, I admit, like it's not good, and I think the actor that they got to play the lead, like, he's trying so hard. Like, there's something really endearing about his performance, because he's really just, you could tell he admires Charlton Heston. He even looks like Charlton Heston quite a bit, I think.
Which honestly, I think is a mistake. I think if he was completely different, it'd be easier to accept him as a new leading character, but because he's just kind of Charlton Heston light, it just feels like the knockoff, and it hurts the character and the actor. Both.
Yeah, I mean, his personality is very different from Heston's character, but there is something really like endearing about his performance. Like he's really trying hard, but sometimes he tries a bit too hard. And it can kind of come off a little bit overdone, especially in the second half.
I think the sad part is that you said that these characters are very different from Heston, and that's only true in so much as that he really has not much of a character, because unlike the first movie where it takes the whole movie of like Heston's, Taylor slowly finding out these things, and we get more of his personality by how he reacts to certain things.
Taylor's always very arrogant in the first film and very like abrasive too. I mean, he's trying to survive. This one kind of is, I don't know, he feels like a lesser version of Charlton Heston's character. Like, he doesn't feel like the leader. He doesn't feel like somebody who's surviving or would be willing to do anything to survive. He seems like just, I don't know.
He's playing. He doesn't really have much of a personality. He's going through the beats of, okay, I need to survive because clearly this is dangerous. But we never really get a sense of who he is as a character, of what he is. And even when he finds out like where he is, and we have that revelation for him, about halfway through the movie, it just kind of,
it's like 20% of what we got of from Heston's performance.
Yeah, but there's also, it doesn't really feel like it pays off anything. It's like, admittedly, this is hard because you're kind of just repeating this plot line from the first movie. Yeah, it's like, okay,
you finally caught up to the audience, and we've already known for an hour.
Yeah, but the problem is that because it's doing that, you have to have some sort of spin on it where him finding out would mean something for his character. So what they really needed to do was have him be someone who, I don't know, maybe just for example, say, maybe constantly made references to how much better Earth is, like maybe like sort of belittle this place and say, or maybe think he's superior than the apes.
Well, that would be kind of a repeat of the first film.
It would be, but I'm just giving that as an example. But there's multiple things you could do potentially. It's not easy, but ultimately it means nothing when it happens, because I mean, the first movie has the character stuff, so that it does have more impact. But the first movie could almost get away with not having it, because it would be a shock to us anyway. Because it's a twist. It's new. I mean, maybe not for us watching it now, because everyone knows the twist of Planet of the Apes. But in the context of watching it for the first time, it would. Whereas here, he's just such a blank slate. He's a plain white sheet of paper. I would love to know what direction this guy got from the director. Like, what's his backstory? Like, who is he? What's his personality? Like, what does he care about? Who does he love? What is he? Like I don't know. There's nothing to him. He's a complete. No. He's nothing. He's. I mean, he's a plain white dude with no personality. There really is.
Yeah, and I don't think he had much of a career, at least as a leading guy.
Oh,
I recognize him. I think he's done TV shows.
I'm going to go and have a look, see what he's done. He was in Cat o' Nine Tails, which I've seen. That's a Argento movie, so that's something noteworthy, but that's kind of about it. He died pretty young. He died at age 57 in 1991. So.
Oh, that is very young.
So, yeah. He's just kind of. Sadly, it's a hard thing to do, and I felt sorry for this as well. I felt sorry for Nova, Linda Harrison, who plays Nova.
Mm-hmm.
She, we kind of alluded this a little bit in the first one, but I felt it even more so than ever in this one, because so much of the first one, it was like Heston was finding someone to kind of bond with, even though she couldn't speak, even though it was different to any other human that he'd ever really sort of been a friend with or anything. There was kind of this, there was something there, at least for the purpose of the character and the plot of the movie. I mean, sure, she was very much a tool for his character. She's not really a character in and of herself, but in the context of him being the lead, that's fine, right? I mean, that's a wider issue if you want to talk about Hawaii. There's no proper female leads. I mean, Zira kind of is, I suppose, actually, to be fair. Zira has more of a character. But
yeah,
in this movie...
And she certainly will in the next films, too.
Yeah, obviously, they get way more time going forward. But in this movie, Nova, I felt more so than ever, is just there to stand and look pretty. And
yeah, definitely.
Because there's so many scenes where, whether it's Brent realizing he's on Earth, or whether it's him talking to someone else like Cornelius and Zira, or whether it's stuff later on in the film, the entire time she's just sort of standing there and being moved around, and stand here, no, stand there, no, go here, no, do this, and she's just there to be there. And it just, I don't know, I mean, it's not like, it's not doing anything super gross necessarily, but it left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I just kind of felt like...
Yeah, I mean, definitely. She is very beautiful, and I mean, they don't give her much to wear, so I think she knows what her character is going into it, but there's also some scenes later on where it's just, there's a lot of she's a bit of a punching bag, and she still kind of hangs out with the same people who are punching her, even though she doesn't understand what's going on. And it's that's also just like, it's too bad.
Yeah.
She has one like decent moment in the film.
She does have one decent moment, which I actually kind of liked and thought, oh, that's kind of a nice beat for her. Unfortunately, that is all she gets the entire movie that's worth anything.
Yeah.
Because like I say, she is a tool for the plot in the first movie as well, but she's a fairly vital tool in the first one, whereas in this one, she is just there to be, essentially to be the damsel. Is it, once things get going, there's moments where she becomes the one who's under threat, and that's kind of what she's there to be. And maybe that's true for a lot of movies in a lot of contexts, but it feels especially bad when our character can't speak and she is just standing there waiting to be in peril.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It sticks out.
She's somewhat helpful to Brent.
Yeah.
I mean, she takes him to the wrong place, but things worked out, sort of.
Did they? Did you see the end of this movie? Nothing worked out. Part of me just feels like this is like some CD producer's like, yeah, this is the perfect role for a beautiful woman in a movie. Yes, just stand there and be quiet. I feel the seediness. We talked about that last time.
She's not that dissimilar from the character of Raquel Welch in what was the Fantastic Voyage?
Fantastic Voyage, yeah.
Yeah.
And she was supposed to be this genius scientist, but you would never know it from her actions.
She has like 3 lines and she wears a really tight wetsuit.
Oh dear. And there was logistical problems about all the men touching her during a vital scene in the movie, which had to be mapped out.
That was funny.
Yeah. Check out a review of Fantastic Voyage for more on that. So Nova's inclusion is kind of awkward in that sense. It's a clunky movie. It's a clunky movie. It's a weird movie. I kind of like the weirdness. Don't get me wrong. Like, I appreciate how kind of batshit it goes.
Yeah, like ways. We don't know where to go, but the movie was a big hit, so we have to make a sequel, and our star doesn't want to be in it. So what do we do? And I mean, you're right. The first half of the film is just a repeat of like the first movie, and then it gets into the super weird, which I do enjoy, and I like all the stuff in Ape City with the new rival, the guerrillas who are like the military unit are trying to like go into the Forbidden Zone and take over for the orangutans who normally are the ones who like I don't know, keep the peace, who make the laws, who do all the prayer. And there's a weird Vietnam anti-war scene where like the chimpanzees, like when the gorillas are about to like ride off into the Forbidden Zone to, I don't know, go to war, they have like picketing signs.
Yeah, no, that seems actually interesting to me, and I actually think one of the biggest failures of this movie is it doesn't actually explore this more. It's weird and random, but only because it's on its own. See if this movie was just set in like Ape City and it was just their politics and them deciding what to do with a potential war.
Like the scene in the sauna between the two leaders, the gorilla leader and the orangutan leader, which is Dr. Zaius, like was actually quite interesting. I liked listening to the politics and the back and forth.
Because I was thinking, because there was so much we talked about in the first movie about, what everything represents and talking about what's it saying about society, and I felt like, there's something, because we talked about how the chimpanzees are kind of the scientists and the thinkers, and especially the younger one, and this felt like a gallery of the younger. This felt like a gallery of college students to me. It felt like a college campus protest. And I thought, that's kind of fascinating. I like that visual. And then it just kind of never goes back to it. Like, it never mentions it again. It's like one little moment. And that could have been interesting. That could
it's like, here's your Vietnam allegory. I guess maybe the society that we meet later also has that. But for the most part, it's just kind of out of nowhere little scene. Like, and I do like the stuff in Ape City. I like getting more of the politics. I feel like it's out there a necessity, because like, the first film was really strong in having all these allegories and actually having social commentary. And I feel like in this one they went, well, let's put in this scene to say we did it, to say we had some more deep themes, but without actually writing a script that kind of used them in any great way or meaningful way. Another thing that hurts the film quite a bit is the mask that some of the apes in the background wear.
Sure.
They are horrendous. They'll do this thing where they have like whoever's sitting in the front row will have like the ape makeup, and then everyone behind them is all wearing the same Halloween costume mask, and it looks awful. And for some reason, they'll like zoom in on them. Like it would be, it's one thing if you have like the guys in the front who all have the good makeup, and then the guys in the very distance are wearing the mask because you can't quite see it, but they show a lot of the faces of the mask, so you can see the contrast like in the same shot very clearly. It's just so confusing to me. Why would they show it so well? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a common tactic. I mean, one I always go back to is Army of Darkness, where they had like actual like mechanical or puppeteered skeletons at the front of this like skeleton army. But if you look at the ones in the background, it's people in suits. And the idea being that you can get away with that. And you couldn't really. In that movie, it's actually really obvious. You could just tell that the ones in the back are people in suits and the ones in the front are actually mechanical things. But, you know, it's that idea that you can get away with the ones in the back being a bit crapper, basically. Which is fine logic, but, it, you know, in this movie, it doesn't really do that. It feels like only the few central characters that actually have the full makeup, and then everyone else has the crap masks. And yeah, like there's a lot of this movie does it a few times actually, where it does this dramatic thing where it'll cut to like a harsh close up of their face or their eyes, and when it does that on the apes that aren't the ones that are actually made up properly, it kind of sticks out and looks a bit.
Yeah, it's just why would they even, like, they have to know it looks bad.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why it would be in a crowd, but why would they zoom in on it? It's so bizarre.
I wonder if there was more production restraints on this movie. Like, I wonder if the budget's lower, or at least the budget after Heston's fee is lower.
Well, I mean, he donated his salary to charity,
Oh, really?
according to the IMDb trivia, which I gave a quick skim over.
What charity?
I don't know.
With
The
Heston,
Foundation.
yeah, with Heston, I don't know if I trust that it was a charity that I would.
You think it's the NRA?
Yeah. Because I don't know. Then this film's responsible for funding awful people.
Yeah.
Then again, lots of people fund that thing, so whatever. But so yeah, no, it's a weird one. Obviously, we'll get into it in spoilers here in a sec. Is there anything else you want to add before we?
There's a lot of
Dive
scenes
in.
that had no music in it. Like fight scenes or action scenes where it was just nothing. I thought that was kind of confusing too. Like, could really use some action scoring right here. Because the first one had like, was it Jerry Goldsmith who did the score for it?
That sounds right.
And this one was noticeably absent.
Yeah. I mean, is this another example? And let's say we're having production restraints, and that's why they're being sloppy with a lot of the extras and masks, and you know, maybe it means that there's less original music. So they're just, or do you think it's a creative choice where the director, for whatever reason, decided that he didn't want
one
music?
of them, that instead of having music, there's like an hypnotic sound effect that they're doing instead. But it goes on for a long time, and there's no music behind it at all, and it's, I don't know. I just think like if you want to up the tension, you have to have some kind of a score.
You can do it without music. I don't think that's necessarily
Not in this scene. Not this type of tension. I'm talking about like who's going to make it out of the fight alive.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's examples of fight scenes working without music.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay, I'll give a good one.
I don't think this is one of them.
No, I agree this isn't one of them, but it is possible. Dark Knight Rises has a fight scene without music, and it's actually really good. Now, admittedly, what you said there is that you don't know who's going to come out alive or who's going to win the fight. That's not the point of that scene in Dark Knight Rises. The point of the scene in Dark Knight Rises is that Batman was always going to lose. I mean, basically, it's mild spoilers for Dark Knight Rises, but like the whole point of that fight is that he never stood a chance. So it's this awkward silence as everyone watches him get beat, and it's very effective. It adds to the feeling that the scene wants to create. So there are applications where not having music in a scene like this can work. I think the problem is that the fight choreography in a relatively low budget movie from 1970 is not up to the par to carry the whole scene on its own plus the direction's not exactly that inventive either. Like, I think if you do...
And it's a long scene.
It's a very long scene. I think if you do a silent fight scene that's like all one take, or you have a fight scene between two people who are really athletic and doing a lot of fancy stuff, or you make it feel really like emotional. Like, let's say it's really aggressive and they really want to kill each other, and you let the awkward silence play out. I think you totally can. I agree with what you're saying about this scene in particular. I don't think it's because the lack of music something that you could just, blanket say needs to be there for every fight scene.
Well, no, I mean, that's not really what I said anyway, but I think for this film, there was just a lack of emotion in this scene because it was just two people fighting with a sound effect in the background the whole time, like a buzzing sound. And it went on for a long time. And yet, like, the fight choreography is not good. The emotions aren't there. Like, I need something else to get me drawn into this, like a score. And it's not the first time that it was missing. Like, it was missing in like when they were trying to escape from a thing, like that it wasn't there either. And it would have been so much better if it had some kind of a score.
I would like to add a point on here though, that if the emotion, because the emotion should partially be there before you add music. Music should be enhancing the emotion, not adding all of it. So this is also a fault of the script, that there's no, you don't really care about the fight because the fight is just very all of a sudden. It's not like I mean, we can't really talk about it because we can't talk about spoilers yet. We can't talk about who's fighting, but it should have like a, oh no, this has to happen. Like, it should have that kind of like sinking feeling. But that's maybe doesn't really make you feel anything. It's not well written enough or performed enough to achieve any of those feelings. So as a goofy B movie, which is ultimately what it kind of is, it kind of needs the music. It needs the crutch, right? It needs the crutch of the music to kind of give it some oomph. So I guess
or just use some of the music from the previous movie. Like, can't you just reuse it?
The music was composed by Leonard Roseman on this one. Rosenman. So, I mean, this is who you're insulting. Well, actually, I don't know if you are.
Well, maybe if he showed up and did his job, I wouldn't be insulted.
Well, actually, I don't know if it is him you're insulting, because if there's a choice to not use music in a scene, that's not really the composer's choice. The composer's just going to show up and score whatever he's told to score. So, this is the director.
I'm sure they wanted the sound effect to be like the thing that people concentrated on, but the use of sound effects for this specific society is all very like
it's all over the place.
Good.
Yeah, so it's a little bit all over the place. So okay, all right. As much as I was kind of fighting you on a couple of things, ultimately I was agreeing with you. I just
yeah. Well, I could tell we were fighting because there was no music behind us.
What do you think, we were arguing about something? There should be some like dramatic, high stakes music playing.
Yeah.
Dun,
you should just up the tension.
Dun,
yeah. Put in some Hans Zimmer.
Dun dun dun.
You got to use the Star Trek fight scene song. I don't know what it's called. The one that they use when Kirk and Spock fight.
Okay. Yes. I was gonna say the main Star Trek theme I don't think would add to a fight scene. I feel like it. If anything, that's what we should play at the end when we're kind of wrapping our thoughts up, and it feels very like, spiritual and hopeful. I guess. Don't know.
Can we afford it?
We most definitely cannot.
Dang it.
So, and Star Trek is, I think Paramount are particularly rough when it comes to getting after people doing like fan films and things like that. So I don't think they're going to let us slyly just use their music in a podcast. But yeah, so I think we'll give the spoiler warning then. Although before we go into the spoilers, I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you, and this is at the time of recording. Admittedly, these episodes will tend to be a week later after we record them, so it's not much of a big difference. But thank you to Alison M. Fordyce, Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Bordenau, and Zammer Jammer. They are all Patreon producers, which means they are producers at the $20 or above tier, and therefore get credits as producers. But of course, you don't have to be a patron at $20. You don't have to be that filthy rich. You can be a patron for much less, can't you, Tara?
That's right. If you like what we do and you'd like to support us and get extra content, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. If you donate as little as $1 per month, you will get access to a plethora of bonus films. If you like B movies especially, this is the subscription for you. So check it out. And if you donate as low as $5 per month, you will get to vote on a movie we do once per month, and you will get access to our episodes one day early. Thank you.
That was almost 100% smooth. There was one blunder when you went to say donate and you almost said donut instead.
Well, I got a lot of things on my mind, particularly sweet
Donuts.
fried doughy things.
Hey, I was thinking about donuts earlier as well. I can't fault you. Can't fault you.
Always thinking about donuts.
Yeah. I love donuts. Alright, that is I'll take us out of spoilers then for Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So first half of the movie, which I suspect will probably be the quicker half of the discussion here, is, we're introduced to Trent. We see Taylor encounter a wall of flames and the ground splitting open and fire shooting up, and then it's gone and they're confused. Where did it go? And then he tries to investigate, and he goes up to this rock, this big cave sort of rock, and just fades into it as if it's if it's not really there, and it's this weird cliffhanger which honestly by the time you actually get to the answers later you may have forgotten any of this even happened because we spent so long with Brent and the regular part of the movie.
Yeah.
But we're interested in Brent. His crew member's already dying, and he's like
I believe his name is Skipper. Captain Skipper.
The guy dies. I tell my family I wish I could feel the sun just one last.
It's a little strange because I think he's gone blind. Like I assume the accident, but there's no trauma to his eyes. Why did him landing a spaceship make him go blind?
Was there a flash of light in his eyes or something? I don't know.
I guess we don't know the backstory, maybe, but it seems awfully strange that he's just laying there with no injuries and he's blind.
Yes, but we're introduced to plain white bread man named of Brent.
Well, we haven't said how they got there, because, okay, so the first film, they go into space with the intention of staying out there forever because they bring in Eve with them.
This is a good point. This is a very good point, actually. Yes, continue.
So their intention was to just go into a cryosleep and go into the future sometime and find a planet and colonate it. But now they're saying that because Brent and his skipper and presumably others went to follow him to see what happened to the previous ship, they ended up in the same place.
No, he actually says the phrase rescue mission. He says that phrase.
Yes.
It was a rescue mission.
So they did not sleep all that time then, I guess. They didn't overshoot by sleeping and end up in the same planet instead. It was because there's no way they could have just gone into cryosleep then woken up in the same area in the same time.
Even before you start questioning the science matching up with how the first ship crashed in the first place, let's just roll this back a little bit. The first ship was supposed to go into space and colonize a planet. Why is there a rescue mission?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why is there unless for some reason on Earth, although I think something at the start of the first one said that they couldn't communicate anymore, but let's just say on Earth they could actually see them go through a vortex or something that they weren't supposed to go through. So okay, no, send a rescue squad. And how hopeless that is, I don't know, but
I think that is what happened in this movie because if you just watch the first movie on its own, it's a complete story that shouldn't be a sequel with someone else showing up. No. That doesn't make any sense. But I think in this scene where Skipper is dying, he says something about a time vortex. So presumably now that means in Planet of the Apes, the reason they get here in the future is because they didn't travel through space, but they traveled through a time vortex. Except their Eve still aged naturally on the ship.
Is it possible, Tara, now bear with me here, is it possible that the writers of this sequel are pulling stuff out their ass that makes no sense? Is it possible that's happening?
But they're professional Hollywood scriptwriters. That doesn't make any sense. Like, clearly they have some plan that is just smarter than us non-writers. Just haven't figured it out. We just don't get it.
No, I'm pretty sure the writer of this is just someone's nephew. They get some producer gave their nephew the job. It's like, oh, you want to be a writer? Come on here,
I think
sunshine.
the writer of this like ended up writing the rest of them, and the rest of them I think are pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if the problem with this one is that they had to somehow like continue the ending of the first one, whereas with the third one onwards, he basically just got to like write a new story from scratch. That, well, not scratch. I mean, it connects to the first stuff in some ways, but in a sense where it's like, okay, this is just a completely fresh idea. That essentially it's a new starting point. You could jump into the third one and start from there if you wanted to, and it would make sense, and it would be a story. You know, 3, 4, and 5 in a lot of ways are kind of a trilogy.
Yeah.
In some
I think
ways.
the opening of 3, you have to like have some like, okay, this is the situation, and I guess I'll accept it in order for them to tell me a good story.
I mean, hell, in a lot of ways, the fourth one is kind of the closest thing that Rise of the Apes is kind of remaking. I mean, it's not really remaking it, it's just doing its own thing, but a lot of it does kind of, you know, ideas kind of match in terms of the goals of what the movies are doing. Obviously, Rise is way better. More in that when we get there, but...
is it, though?
I'm pretty sure it is. Don't try and, you know, sweet talk your nonsense into that conversation. No. But you know, like, so yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see. So yeah. The writer, for the record, let me just see who wrote this. The screenplay was by Paul Den. Was story by Paul Den and Mort Abrams. So we'll see. There's obviously a characters based on Pierre Boulez. I assume he wrote the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's some French book. I've never read it.
I mean, did you know it was French, or just because I said his name was Pierre that you went, it's French?
I think we looked it up for the first film.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So yeah, so basically he very quickly, and this is, we're talking about this, because remember in the first movie, now obviously he's landing I'm not saying this is a mistake, because obviously they've landed in different places. But you know, in the first movie when they land, there's this like long journey where they're not really sure if they're going to find water, and it's this like, you know, this trek through the desert and the wastelands and blah 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 blah. In this film, he's literally just buried the other guy, and then almost immediately, as he's still kind of crying, you hear a horse. You're like, oh, that was quick. Oh, we're getting going.
Oh, it's Nova.
Yeah, Nova's just stumbled into the movie because they could afford to bring her back, and she was willing to come back. So, so here she is.
Presenting Nova, and she's wearing Taylor's dog tags.
Yes, which is what leads him to like suspect that she knows something. Obviously, she doesn't speak to him because she can't, but he tries to like.
Although
point
he tries to get her to talk for a long time.
And she eventually she has like these quick little flashes of like Taylor in her head when he says his name. So she at least understands his name now. It establishes that she can't speak yet, but she can't understand that word. She understands who Taylor is when someone says that name.
We get a brief flashback of Heston teaching her how to, like, Nova, Taylor, over and over again. And she doesn't look like she's figuring it out.
Wasn't that in the first movie, though? Wasn't that just a clip from the first movie?
It might have been. I can't remember.
I feel like it was. Which doesn't really matter. I'm just, the point I'm making is...
think so, because it's also the same scene where he talks about like we can start a new society and all the children will talk, and it's again one of those moments where it's the two love, like the lovers are together but they have no like chemistry. Like he really sounds like he's talking to a child when he's talking to her, but then talking about procreating. Ugh.
we could never actually, I think, figure this out. But I would be willing to have a friendly bet with you that this scene of them learning the name is a deleted scene then from the first one. Right? If it's not in there to begin with, that it's not something they shot for this movie, that it's something they had that they happened to cut out and they were able to just kind of slot it in here. It's like, oh, we can use this.
Okay, I would take that bet because she's wearing his dog tags in this scene. He gives her the dog tags, I think.
Oh, you may be right.
Yeah.
Okay, you might have won this one. You may be just cunning for me on this occasion, Tara.
Score.
But I'll get you next time.
Something.
Yeah, I see. I was smart enough not to actually put any stakes on it. So, yes. So she takes him to I keep wanting to say Gorilla City because in the Flash, there's a city in Africa called Gorilla City where intelligent apes live, and this obviously isn't that, but
It's Ape City. We call it Ape Town.
Ape Town. There you go. So basically, he just from afar sees them having this kind of like town like meeting, right? Where they're talking about, and this is the thing, like in the last movie, there's a bit of a leap here for me where it didn't feel like in the last movie they were this aware that there was another society like in the Forbidden Zone relatively nearby that they might, you know, want to go and start a war with.
Yeah, it's very like hush hush, like no one is allowed in the Forbidden Zone.
Yeah, but all of a sudden here we're having a full meeting with like, you know, like 100 apes talking about it. So clearly, in a very short span of time, things have changed significantly.
Yeah, apparently they know that there's something out there because their scouts have gone out and some of them have returned and some of them like talk about how there's these magical walls of fire that show up and somebody is hanging the apes from their, I don't know. So either it's another ape city or it's maybe humans.
Do you know, that may have been more interesting. See if it was just another faction of apes and they discovered that they hated each other and it was like ape versus ape war. That would have been actually kind of an intriguing premise.
Ape, no kill ape. It's ape law.
It's a lie. The law is based on a lie. So, yeah. So, and obviously we see that Zero is not particularly happy, you know, to the point actually, because so later on when Dr. Zeus goes to like see them, right, and she has like an injury on her face, the excuse for it is that Creo says, "Oh, I hit her for the way she was kind of being sarcastic at the meeting," and Zeus just kind of goes, "Yes, I don't blame you." Like,
yes, I would have done the exact same thing. Like,
all
Jesus
right.
Christ.
All right. Okay, we know what this society's like. All right.
Yeah, and she's just like washing her face, like, "Oh, no big deal. He just hit me again." I love how like the opening scene, because the opening scene's from the first Planet of the Apes, we get Roddy McDowall as Cornelius, and then we go here and it's not Roddy McDowall anymore because he wasn't here to film anything. This is the only movie that he's not in, technically.
Out of the originals, because he's not in the new ones, right?
No, obviously he died, many years ago. But
well, I didn't know he died. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he said, "Oh, he's got cameos." He's actually like he's mocapping one of the main characters.
Well, actually, he might have been in the Tim Burton one.
What a disappointing end to his legacy.
Heston's in it. I know that.
Nah, he deserves Tim Burton.
Maybe Roddy McDowall died before then. If only there was a way I could check. But my cat is sleeping on top of my mouse.
Is that I found a mouse? I cut the mouse. And I use it as bed. So basically from here, they sneak in. Nova.
He gets shot. Well, he gets shot.
Oh, that's later.
Well, he gets shot like 3 times in this movie. So he gets shot first, and then Nova takes him to Zira because she fixes him. Right.
Yeah. So they're surprised to see them, and I actually kind of like the subtle thing where they said to him, "Are you Taylor? Taylor's back?" And I'm like, "What? Because all humans look alike? Is that what you're saying?" And he's obviously yes, he has.
But he does kind of look like him. He's just like similar. 2 feet shorter.
Well, he's similar in the same way that oh god, most Matt Berry's character in What We Do in the Shadows. I forgot his name. Laszlo. He's similar in the sense that Laszlo might mistake him and sleep with the wrong one, right? That's how similar he looks, but not really to anyone with eyes.
It's a completely different person.
Right? If you've not seen What We Do in the Shadows, just go watch it. You'll get the joke, and it's great.
The television show, yes.
Yeah. But
also,
actually,
watch the movie. The movie's great.
A more serious point to bring up here, though, actually, just from the meeting again, before I forget about it, is there's a line in here that I thought was really either an oversight or a really intentional placement to try and provoke some thought, right? I'm probably leaning towards oversight given the quality of the movie overall, but where I think it's the lead gorilla says, we don't just fear humans because of their white skin, and at first I thought, oh, that's kind of notable that there's no other human. I was like, no, wait, there was a black character in the first movie, so It's
Yeah.
kind of weird that the apes still refer to humans primarily as white skin. Now, is that just the shadiness of the time and them not acknowledging, like, and the writers not even thinking about this, and it's kind of reading as them being kind of dicks, and just kind of like, I don't know, systematically racist, essentially.
Yeah.
Or is this an intentional thing where they're trying to make a point about how the apes wouldn't differ or something? I don't know. I wasn't sure, but the line really stuck out to me.
Yeah, so I think the comment is, I think it's just the writers trying to do another allegory and like just get one in there real quick, but I think maybe they didn't realize what they were stepping into when they wrote that. They just thought this will be a poignant thing that'll make people think, without realizing that actually it's kind of problematic. But I mean, it's not like the issue of class and race isn't brought up in the first one, but it's between all the apes, like the chimpanzees versus the orangutans are clearly like the lower class citizens.
They're a mirror of human culture, but they're all within the ape structure, so it's kind of like, here's what our metaphor is.
Yeah, I think the confusing thing is that the first movie, I mean, the humans didn't represent another race. They represented animals because they were kept in cages and used for like taxidermy for their museums and stuff. But I think this one's trying to like say, oh no, now it's more poignant because it's about race. But it's not really explored. It's just like a throwaway thing. Like, look, we're really clever, and it's not good. It doesn't age well.
I think I would agree. I think it's intentional, but I think it's intentional in a really kind of immature way where they didn't realize what the can of worms they were opening. And like you say, it does not explode. It doesn't really come back later. And if they're saying the humans are the white people, what is that saying? What for the metaphor's sake is this implying? And there's a really problematic line of thinking there, which I don't know if that's what they intended. I don't know if that's what they wanted, but I think that just if it's not what they intended, then it just shows you how poorly thought out the line was in the first place. So
right.
Yeah. So not to bring the tone down here and get very serious for a minute, but the line really stuck out to me because it felt weird, and yeah. So.
But I think this does get explored in later films. Like I think Conquest does have a different analogy, or the same analogy, but done in a better way. I think it's been a long time since I've seen it.
Yeah, don't stake your reputation on how good that is yet before we get there. Back to Planet of the Apes. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, in particular, beneath the surface.
Have we gone beneath yet?
We're getting there. Well, because we're at the point where
we have to get through the sauna scene.
We brought that up. Yeah, we talked about how the Zeus and the gorilla sort of leader.
Yeah.
Would you say that they engage in guerrilla warfare?
I'm pretty sure that's the reason this movie existed, because of Vietnam, and they wanted to make a guerrilla warfare joke.
I'm just...
Sorry.
My God, the world's burning. Like,
I know.
It's actually turning to Planet of the Apes over there.
Is there a plague outside? Should I go lock the doors?
Technically, there is a plague outside, but that's the no.
I know. Did you see the news that the bubonic plague's coming back?
I did. You sent me that link.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little concerning. My hope is that because everything's been kind of shut down and everyone's sort of staying away from each other already, that maybe this won't get a chance to spread because we're already in the mindset of trying to stop something from spreading, that maybe it'll go better.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll go better.
Let's not bring back the Black Death, please.
Yeah, let's not do that. But ultimately, Zira and Curious, who we don't really see much of after this point, give Brent enough stuff, some water, some food, and send them on their way. But of course, they barely get very far.
Immediately get captured.
Yeah, they get like maybe, I don't know, a minute away from the town before the horse is shot and they're on the run. And we get a bit of game of cat and mouse as and they end up going into like a cave, but they end up in like a subway is ultimately, and this is where he has his big moment where he's like, wait, this is New York. And do you know what Joe was so funny about it? Is that obviously it's New York because it was the Statue of Liberty, you know, at the end of the first movie. But there was a moment where he started seeing signs for stuff before you actually see it say New York, where I went, oh, I wonder what side there. And, and then it said New York. Well, of course it's New York. It was a Statue of Liberty.
Come on, Peter.
I know, it was
You
a
must
brain
be
fart.
really into the film.
It was a brain fart of a moment, right? I admit, this was
Did
just...
you end up in Philly? Chicago?
Hey, geographically speaking, Philadelphia wouldn't be the worst place.
No, they're pretty close, actually.
Yeah, you can drive. You know, I mean, you can drive anywhere in the U.S., but well, except Hawaii, and I suppose. But, but you know, in a reasonable amount of time, it's not a ridiculous journey.
No.
By U.S. standards, it is larger than the entire height of my island that I'm on. But that's not here nor there. So. But they end up down here, and he has his moments, and it's all a bit... It's kind of funny, because we get all these sets now where there's doors and stuff, because now it's like, you know, it's the remains of...
I do like seeing them. Like, I like seeing all the underground sets, and I mean, a lot of them are just matte paintings, but I do appreciate it. Like, I like seeing old New York underneath.
Yeah, it's funny, actually, because it's obviously I just recently finished Last of Us Part 2, and it's funny how... When we're starting seeing, like, you know, like a bus in the background because under the rubble and stuff, I'm like, oh, this is starting to feel, you know, kind of that type of post-apocalyptic. Because for the most part it does it, because for the most part Planet of the Apes is just like, you know,
Desert.
Fields and desert. Yeah, it's just plain stuff that could be anywhere. So, you know, but this is where they get to the shenanigans, because Brent, well, they find some water, there's like some running water somewhere, and he starts drinking from it, and I think there's maybe almost like a red herring here, where you think that maybe it's the water that's done this to him, because, you know, he drinks it, and then Nova starts drinking it afterwards, and then he starts like freaking out. We get a close up of his eyes, and he starts shaking.
We hear a sound.
Yeah, we hear the or something. But it wasn't that.
The sound of telekinesis.
The sound of, yes, telekinesis. And he starts like shaking. Do you know what it almost says? Do you know, like that famous gif of Star Trek?
It's so Star Trek.
Next Generation.
He's so Shatner.
Well, no, I was thinking in Next Generation, it's like a nobody, like a red shirt or someone at the console who starts shaking because something happens on the screen. It's a Next Gen clip. It's a famous gif. It gets used all the time.
No, I don't know.
Because the joke ending of it is that it cuts to the computer screen and it's like a Windows blue screen of death, which...
Oh.
But, you know, the actual clip's obviously just from something happening in an episode of Star Trek. And what is with the sirens today?
I don't know, man. End of the world outside?
Tara robbed like a bank in the last week or something. Something went on.
That does sound like me.
They're coming for Tara.
They're coming for Foxy.
Oh yeah,
dog.
Foxy. Yeah.
She's trouble. Nothing but trouble.
Foxy's so foxy, she should be legal, and she is. Is your dog named after Foxy Brown?
Sort of. So I got her from a shelter, and they already named her Foxy. They named her Foxy Cleopatra after a very Foxy Brown-like character in an Austin Powers movie.
Ah, okay. All right. So you didn't pick the name, but...
Well, I kept the name Foxy. I dropped the Cleopatra part. And now she's just Foxy Lady.
So it's a bit snobby for a dog to have a double-barrel name like that.
Yeah. She's not a Bond girl or an Austin Powers girl.
Yeah.
I would like to say that she's named after Foxy Brown. I only recently watched that movie. And you know what? It ain't bad.
Oh, it's a pretty good movie. It's a really solid movie. I liked it too. It's one of those things where you go back and watch it as a Tarantino fan, which, you know, both of us, by the time we saw it, were. And you sort of see a lot of the influence and stuff. It's good.
It definitely makes me want to watch Jackie Brown when I watch it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason why it's called Jackie Brown, and it stars Pam Grier, because it's clearly inspired by that era of films starring her. I've not got around to Coffee yet, which is another big one, but...
No, I've never seen that either.
But no. So... Yes, this is really telekinetic nut jobs, the cult who worship the nuclear bomb that's down here.
Well, he tries to kill Nova.
He tries to kill Nova, yeah. He tries to dunk her head in the water, and then pulls himself away eventually, or they stop making him do it gradually or whatever, and eventually he's drawn into the next room, and he sees someone praying at, you know, the altar, and it's this nuclear warhead at the front. Not a nuclear. It's the Doomsday warhead, as we find out later. It's just the biggest bomb ever. They could like ruin the atmosphere to the entire planet.
It's the Alpha Omega. Can't say it. I don't have as many teeth as Charlton Heston does. He's a very toothy actor. Alpha Omega.
So, and this is where we find out they've got telekinesis. And this is the funny thing, is for a good while during this scene when he meets, like, first he meets one, then he meets like 4 or 5 of them in a row, and they all talk to him via telekinesis. So you never hear what they're saying. You only hear his answers, which I thought was kind of ballsy. You hear like some weird sound effects. So there's like some beeping and booping that happens as they're talking to him. I won't quite say it's R2D2 levels, but it's definitely something interesting in the soundtrack. But what I thought was weird though is that eventually in the scene, after he's been just responding, we don't hear what they're saying. Eventually, he starts to really get a lot of pain, and one of them says, "Okay, we shall now speak verbally," because his puny little mind clearly can't handle all of this telepathic communication. Also, you said telekinesis earlier. Technically,
you're right.
No, telepathy, not telekinesis.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I agreed at the time because I think in my head, because it was the act of
well, they were forcing him to move, to do actions.
Yeah,
if
but
you're controlling a human, isn't that telekinesis?
No, because I think they're controlling his head to make him want to do it. So he's doing the actions himself.
Okay.
He's doing the physicality part himself.
I was wrong.
Hey, I didn't notice it at first. I just realized there as we started talking about stuff.
I noticed it at first. As soon as I said it, I went, I bet he's going to correct me. And then you didn't. But then you did.
Are you disappointed that I eventually corrected you?
No, I expected it. So how can I be disappointed if it's what I expected?
How was I supposed to win? If I don't correct you, the comments are going to be like, actually, I think you'll find is telepathy. Where did you get this one from? Maybe Tara should, leave.
Well, I would never act this way towards one of our loyal viewers. I adore them. But with you, I can act that way. I
don't adore all of them. Every so often there's a shithead in the comments. I don't mean to. Most of you are lovely people.
People watch and want to comment.
Sometimes you get.
And I don't read them, so I don't know what they say. So I'm sure that they're all positive.
Joe, if there's something that bothers me, it's a lack of nuance. Where clearly it's obvious you meant to say telepathy, right? And you just said the wrong word. It's not a big deal, right? And I just know that some people, the way they'd respond to that is like, telekinesis, no. And that's all they'll say. Like you've committed a sin because you slipped the wrong word out. Once we're down here, and we're interested in what I did think was weird though is that later on it cuts to the group again of telepaths, and they're watching like they've got like telepathic vision of the outside world, so they can like see the apes coming, and they all talk verbally, and I'm like, why are you talking verbally when you're on your own? There's no reason for you to be talking like this to each other. Yeah.
There's another thing they all do that it's a bit confusing as well.
Because, like, I mean, the thing you're talking about is the singing later, right? When they're in the church. At least with that, I could accept the argument. The whole point of singing is you want to hear what it sounds like all together, so they have to do it out loud.
They said when they pray or when they sing to their god, which is the bomb, that they speak out loud.
Sure.
Because that's the way their ancestors did it, or whatever.
Yes. So this is basically a mutant faction that deal with nuclear, radiation, and then evolution over however many centuries it's been, have become this weird telepathic society, and they keep insisting that they're a peaceful people. In fact, at one point, I shit you not. So later on, when they make, because when you eventually get to Brent versus Taylor, right? The actual line of that, and I was already thinking this, but this line put it over the edge, where he actually outright says, the guy making them do it says, "We're a peaceful people. We don't kill our enemies. We make them kill each other." And I'm like, how is that peaceful? That is not peaceful. Just because your hands aren't doing the killing doesn't mean it's not peaceful.
I think that's also a commentary on like America, proxy wars.
I get it, but it's just like it's so to actually blatantly say it in that succinct a way just felt absurd to me. But hey ho.
I like the reveal of it though, because all of a sudden they go from like, we're happy to be reunited and have a companion on this planet where they can talk to each other and they're from the same place, to immediately, oh crap, we're gonna have to murder each other now.
Well, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the lack of music in this scene, is that, like, say if they'd actually given us some time with them to establish that they're actually friends or they know each other, or maybe they grow
they have
to
like minor history.
Yeah. Or maybe they grow to bond here over a bit of time. That could actually be quite a meaningful thing, that they have to fight each other, but it happens within seconds of them meeting each other. And it's like a minor recognition thing where Taylor's like, oh, yeah, you're Brian. I think I saw you hanging around NASA or something. Like, there's that kind of sentiment. And then they have this big fight, and all the bars in this cage have like spiky sort of elements on them. Which actually reminds me, there was one scene, because like you said earlier, there's like multiple times they're on the run from the apes earlier on. There's a scene where they're in like a carriage in a cage. It's after
with no music.
Yeah, it's after they get captured the first time, and then they're taken in the cage. There's like a whole sequence, which to be fair, I actually thought was a fun little sequence where he climbs out of the cage and actually sort of strangles the ape. And he's there's a lot of stunt work in this scene, which makes it probably the most impressive action scene of the whole movie.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So because it's a horse and carriage basically, and he's like strangling the ape who was driving, and
Yeah, it would have been great if there was some music.
I'll give you that one. That one.
There's
felt
no
like
score in it.
That's the one that felt like it needed some music. So, but yeah, we have this fight, and they both get cut. They're both getting beat up here, and they're trying to resist, but they can't help it. And it's during this where Nova kind of like gets away from whoever she's with. I think it's because the apes are starting to invade the city. We'll get to the ape side of all this stuff in a minute.
Yeah, she bites the hand of some Star Trek looking guy.
Yeah,
and then escapes.
And she runs in and she breaks up the fight and distracts the guy who's making them do this with the telepathy. Sorry, I said the wrong one. Where she actually says her first word. She says Taylor, kind of awkwardly. And it's actually kind of a nice moment. It's probably the best idea this movie has, is to give her a moment where she eventually says the word. She's learned from Taylor and Brent to speak or start speaking, and it's kind of a good moment. And this gives them their chance to kill the guard, which they do by kind of like impaling him on the door that's got spikes on it, and then shutting it over the way so that he goes into the other side of spikes too, and then he's bloody. In fact, we didn't even mention it. It's before this scene where they reveal that all of their faces are actually masks. They look human, for the record. They look human.
This is the thing where I'm like, why are they all wearing masks like around each other?
No, that's a fair point. I didn't realize that's what we were talking about, but you're right. Yeah, why are they doing this? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's just a cosmetic thing, but if everybody looks the same, they've all mutated, why do they all need to put masks on?
So yeah, it does that thing. It's almost like from years later Mission Impossible, where they take off the mask, but as they take it off, obviously they switch shots, so it's like a rubber mask, and they peel it off, and they're all bald and sort of radiated and
blue, and they have like no skin. I will say that I love it. Like, I think it looks cool, and I think it's a neat reveal. I like the way they pull the masks off and stuff, and it's done pretty well.
I think the question I asked you though, does any of this belong in a Planet of the Apes movie?
Okay, so I guess what it makes you think of is, so the apes had to have enough time to evolve to be intelligent, and the only reason they had that opportunity is because humans were gone, or not gone, but like reverted back to not being able to speak.
Just one caveat here on this. This is ignoring what it then reveals in the other sequels coming after, because technically, because technically it's not like it just happens from scratch like we assume it does at this point if you're watching these for the first time.
Right. But, right. Well, if you're watching them in order, what this makes you think is, okay, so there's two types of humans that exist on this world. Those who have gone back. They're basically like the time machine humans, the like MODOK and the Eloy or something. Like the ones on the surface who survived nuclear fallout became like I don't know, reverted back to just being primal, and they can't speak and they just live off land. And the ones that hid underground and were affected by nuclear radiation those continue to evolve. So even though they have these, they're like mutants now with different powers, but it's like the next stage of human evolution because of it. So they continue to get smart, but they also ignore the humans that are on the surface as animals now. So it's her having this moment where she's able to understand and speak is a big deal. Like, now maybe humans can come back. Maybe we can learn. Maybe humans can get go back to being equal with, I guess, apes, eventually. So I mean, it is a really cool moment, and it is pretty significant for this mythology.
Yeah. And then she's killed off immediately afterwards.
And then she's killed off.
Yes. Now, to be fair, so are the two male leads as well. They're both killed off by the end of the film, essentially. But hers feels particularly kind of, I don't know, just kind of like...
She's just shot.
Yeah, just disregarded. Yeah. Like, it's a nothing moment. It's like, oh wait, did that result in her death? It did. Okay. Oh,
well, so she's shot by an ape. She's shot by an ape who has gotten into the bunker or whatever and is just shooting at all of them, and she's the only one who gets hit. She dies. And then immediately it's Charlton Heston who's just like, I need to kill all of the apes. They don't deserve to live. And,
which is, again, kind of problematic given the themes that this movie's playing with class and mistreatment and inequality. But then on top of that, like, can I just talk about the actual way this scene is shot? I thought the way Ape's entrance into the scene was really weird, because it's this wide shot looking at the three of them. They're kind of at the top of a little bit of stairs. Not like a staircase, just like a, like 3 or 4 steps, like a little raised area. And they both look towards the camera. And there's like a good couple of seconds where it doesn't really make it clear what's happening. Like, they don't yell out like, oh, there's an ape coming, or they don't like react shocked. They just kind of stare and wait for the ape to come up to them. And it's this, and the ape just kind of like, shrugs into the scene really awkwardly from off camera. I don't know, it felt really weirdly choreographed and laid out to me.
Yeah, pretty clunky.
Yeah, clunky, that's the word. Yeah, it's clunky. So, that's kind of weird. But the actual, like, ending of the movie, I mean, aside from the fact that I think right before this scene is the scene where we have to, like, sit and watch them sing for 5 minutes, which went on far too long. Like, we got it. They sing to their god, their rocket.
I like the prayers. I like this mythology a lot. I mean, I don't like it in the sense of it kind of changes the first movie, but as, like, the first movie is a standalone masterpiece, and the mythology that builds after that is B-movie fun. I don't know, just sit down and enjoy this world. And
I'm a fan of the Halloween franchise. I know full well how to separate the sequels as B-movie fun after the masterpiece originally. Yes, I'm familiar with this concept.
Okay, and Jurassic Park kind of falls into it too.
Yes, it does.
So, it's a familiar strategy for us movie fans. Maybe even Jaws.
Oh, I think Jaws definitely. I mean, I've not even seen Jaws 2 or 3, but
they're pretty bad.
No, I've heard Jaws 3 is good bad though.
There is one where like the son of Jaws or whatever is taking it out on the Brody family, and it's like hunting them down.
I'm sure it
might be Revenge.
That's the fourth one, Revenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only thing I know about that movie is that Michael Caine's in it, and he was once asked if he ever actually saw the film. Did he ever see Jaws: The Revenge? He said no, but I saw the house that it built.
It's a pretty great clip.
So, anyway, where are we? So yes, so basically they come in, and during this portion of the film, we've been cutting back to the apes occasionally, who have been storming, because that was the whole thing with their meeting earlier on, is they want to storm the Forbidden Zone and get to this faction, whoever they may be. And there's a moment where they try to like project, like basically like a horrible kind of like not graveyard, but lots of pikes with apes on them, all like dead, and a statue of the ape. What do they call them again? The apes. They call them
the lawgiver.
The lawgiver. That's the one. And the statue's crying blood. There's fire like in front of all these like dead apes, and the apes are all in shock and they're in awe. But then eventually it disappears. And I thought it was kind of this weird thing they've got in this movie where the telepaths then say that the apes aren't smart enough for them to continue their projections, and therefore they don't work on them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's like backwards logic. Surely if they're dumb, then it would work forever or work longer than it would a smarter being.
Yeah, I
don't-
noticed that line too. It's like, oh, it's the apes. They're too primitive for us for our telepathic powers to work on them. And it's like, what? Like, how is this logic working out for you? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
To be fair, it does apply to the humans as well, who I guess they would also consider too primitive. Because, I mean, even at the start of the film, when Heston sees stuff, it disappears after a minute. Like, it doesn't stay there forever. So, the logic that, that both our humans and the apes are both equally primitive in that sense are fine. But I still don't understand the logic of why being dumber makes it harder to convince them of a thing for longer. It makes it easier. That's how idiocy works.
Yeah. They just can't project their brains can't handle the projection image for long periods of time.
There's a reason why
I
the
guess
Big
you
Bang
have to be smart for it to work.
There's a reason why the Big Bang Theory got like 11 seasons, alright? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't watch that show.
Well, of course not. You're not primitive. Apologies to any Big Bang Theory fans in the audience, but
You just upset a lot of people's dads.
so what am I getting at here? So the apes storm the base, basically. The apes storm the base and come in, just killing the telepaths left and right, shooting them down, and eventually, obviously, killing Nova. There's a whole fight going on in the main altar where the apes storm in, with Zeus kind of leading the charge, and we actually have them shoot, like, Charlton Heston gets shot quicker than Brent does. I mean, he's not dead. He's sort of like, he's got this sort of the heroic death where he's like bleeding out and he's like saying, "Damn you, I'm trying to help you," or "Help me stop this," or blah blah. And Brent just goes on a bit of a murdering spree, trying to shoot as many apes as possible before getting gunned, as if he's being shot by firing squad. He gets riddled with holes, which is notable because everyone else in this movie, including Nova, who gets shot, you don't see a gun like a wound or anything. Like Nova has the classic Western death where you don't see any blood or anything to imply she's actually been shot. She's just down.
She dies in a very pretty way.
Yes. But the end of the movie, and not so much the action of the movie, but how it chooses to like portray it is what really got me, because I'd forgotten this, is that Heston basically crawls towards the trigger, which, by the way, I don't really buy that the trigger for this doomsday missile is this weird futuristic little, like, surely if anything it'd be an old computer system. Yeah, it's these crystals. It's like, it's almost like Superman's Fortress of Solitude, like just a little bit of it.
Yeah, it's hard not to think of that when you see it.
Yeah, but Heston just kind of crawls and just pushes down the big red button to launch it because he just wants to kill everything at this point. The big red crystal. The big red crystal, sorry. And it sort of like fades to like sort of like a white and then black, and then a narrator comes in. A narrator, which has not been there for the duration of this movie. This very serious voice. And then in that day, this, a medium-sized sun and its satellite, a green planet, which is odd. Most people call it the blue planet, but whatever. This green, maybe in the future after the apocalypse, it's green. But this green planet was dead, and it just cuts to like the silent credits. There's no music over the credits. It just cuts to silent credits.
Over, yeah.
It's so stark and just like, nope, we're all doomed. We're dead. The end. Which I have to admit, if nothing else, Nova speaking for the first time is a good idea. The wagon escape is a fun little stunt sequence, and the ending has some balls. The rest of it's kind of a weird sequel mess, is how I'd describe it.
I sort of love how it ends, especially because I know that Charlton Heston definitely did not want to have another sequel. He didn't even want to be in this one, obviously. And how do you guarantee no more sequels? You blow up the planet of the games.
Yes, he wasn't. I mean, it certainly takes him out of the picture, but it definitely, obviously, like, we'll just do some time travel. Yes, we've set up this vortex, this time vortex is just hanging around. So, we'll just have some of the apes go there. Because, if no one knows this, the premise of the next one is that Zira and Cornelius actually travel to present-day Earth and live in our society, or, 1971 society.
Right.
So because this movie came out in 1970, the original was 68, so they're pretty quick in how they're basically year by year. Once after this point, more or less, I think so. Very short span of time. So we'll see where we go from here, but the second one's a weird movie because the first half is
weird. I think this one is the weirdest of all.
Yeah, the first half's so repetitious, and then even all the stuff in the second half is weird in concept just on its own. But even in the context of like what the rest of the franchise is nothing else is even remotely touching upon any of this again. Like there's never any other, at least as far as I remember, there's never a hint of like the telepath society like becoming a thing like later on or.
Right. No.
This is
Nothing
completely
like that.
standalone. Yeah. Which is why I compare it to Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, because that's often considered the weird one of that franchise for a couple of reasons. One, for some reason, Freddy doesn't kill anyone in their dreams in that movie. He possesses someone instead, so it's like the rules have completely changed. Kind of like here we have this telepath society. And then on top of that, the director and the star were like determined to make it like a queer movie. So there's a lot of like erotic subtext in the film. And it's actually kind of a fun watch because of that, because once you start noticing that, it's like, oh, like how because there's other people, there's producers in the movie who claimed they had no idea, and I'm like, how did you not notice some of this stuff that they're doing in this movie?
Interesting.
But
I've never seen it. I'm intrigued though.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting one. I appreciate that a lot more now than I did the first time I worked through the franchise. When we did it in streams, I was like, you know what, I actually kind of like this one. It's nowhere near as good as the original or 3, which is my favorite of the series and the real sequel, but it's a
Right.
really interesting.
Directed by the Blob director.
Yeah. See, look at us
Check out our
knowing
review
things.
of the Blob 88
Yeah,
from
I mean,
last week or 2 weeks ago.
it was literally last week's episode, so
Oh, yeah.
not hard to find. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's got problems. I think a lot of its politics are basically not thought out, or even it feels like they just shoved in some political moments or lines to give the appearance.
I definitely would have liked to have seen more of it.
To give the appearance of that stuff, but without any actual thought. And none of it really clicks together. Nova's inclusion just feels kind of, I don't want to say it's just purely sleazy, but there's not much more to it than that.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to that.
Yeah, she's like a potted plant, like a pretty
Yeah.
thing in the background for most of it.
Yeah, so that's kind of that. But there's a couple of things to like about it. It is definitely an interesting watch just to see, especially the second half. The first half's a bit more of a slog because it is just kind of repeating.
Yeah, it takes a while before we get to the underground mutant society in New York, which is remarkably like what happens in Futurama. But
It's about halfway through that transition happens, because I think the problem with the first half is that him running away from the apes or trying not to get captured. It's like it's
he gets
just
captured like 3 times, and it's like back to back. Like he's really not very good at this.
it's repetitious, but it's also repetitious of stuff that was also a lot of the first movie. So
Yeah.
it's just like, please do something new, do something else. And well, obviously we'll save our opinions on the next one until we get to it and actually remind ourselves, because maybe we'll feel differently. But if nothing else, the next one is not repeating anything
No,
from the first two. It's a
I
completely
don't
new
think so.
concept. Maybe it parallels some ideas, the idea of Heston in the first movie being in the ape society. Maybe they'll parallel like what they go through in the human society and sort of make some counterpoints. But the concept just lends itself to not being the same thing again, which is pretty much what you'd want from an interesting sequel. And this is kind of a weird, ugly duckling, I suppose, of the franchise.
I think it's still worth a watch. Like if you're a fan of the franchise, like it is just this bizarre little film in these series that for the most part makes sense. Like I agree what you said. The third, fourth, and fifth are kind of their own separate trilogy, mostly around Cornelius and Zira, and some other characters that are new.
I'll tell you, I feel like this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of things they could flesh out if they wanted to actually rewrite it. But as it is now, I think I would like them to cut out 10 minutes of it just to speed up that first half, and you don't have to pad it as much. You can because like you said, them escaping and getting caught 2 or 3 times, that feels like padding.
Yeah, it does. But they don't want them to get to the mutant society too fast because that's where Charlton Heston is, and he has very limited time in this film.
Yeah, but if you cut the movie down to like 80 minutes, that means Charlton Heston's percentage of the movie has went up.
For the same amount of work.
Yeah. It means that instead of being in, 10%, he's now in 15% of the movie. Because you've cut out some other stuff.
Yeah. He definitely did not want to do this film.
No.
Didn't even take the paycheck.
And I think you can kind of see it in the performance a little bit as well. I think it's a little bit checked out.
I mean, he still feels like Taylor, but there's no, like, the scenes he has with Nova are kind of like, I definitely don't buy their relationship now.
He also looks notably different, and it's not like he's that much older. It's only 2 years later, but
his hair's a bit longer.
It feels like he didn't want to change his whatever hair he had, so they just had to try and make it work with what he was supposed to look like from the first one. So I felt the difference. I felt like this doesn't feel like how he looked at the end of the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but on the weird side that. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it though.
I think so.
Yeah. Would you like to rate Beneath the Planet of the Apes?
Sure. I will start. So yeah, as far as wrap up goes, it's still a pretty fun watch, and I think the mythology is really neat, even if it's not something that continues later on really at all, because the planet blows up. But it's just they didn't know how to make a sequel, and so they just sort of took I don't know, the most out there concepts, and which ends up being interesting, but ultimately not something that they could continue on in the next film. So I don't know. I get it. It's a mess. It's 2 movies in one, and it's doesn't the lead is super try hard, but it is still really fun to watch, and it has some nostalgia for me. I'm gonna give it a 6. Yeah, a 6.
Okay. Do you know, something that occurred to me as you were giving your final points there is that I think if this movie had no humans, well, not no humans, but no Brent, right, and maybe even little to no Taylor. See if it was just about, okay, we're in the ape city now, and they discover this group of telepaths, and we just developed the entire movie about their conflict and about building up both sides.
Yeah, that could be good.
That would have been a better movie, I think, because the problem isn't necessarily the concept of the telepaths. It's just how quickly they're thrown in, and we have to buy everything that they're about and what they are, and there's definitely stuff you could have done with them, but as it is, it feels
maybe they were probably afraid to make the apes the main characters until later on. It worked in the first film. The first film was a huge success so we're just going to use that formula again.
Yeah. So it ends up feeling a bit like a goofy episode of Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
So, and everything I've already said. So I think a 6 sounds kind of in the ballpark. I might go just a nudge lower to 5.5, just a nudge, just a little nudge.
Okay.
So I think it's watchable, and I think there's definitely enough in there that's kind of weird and wacky to at least make it an interesting kind of experiment. Admittedly, I don't know how often I'm going to want to rewatch this one now. I don't know if there's much value in going back to it, but I think it's worth at least one watch if you're wanting to check out the whole series for sure.
Yeah, I like watching it. I think it's still pretty fun to watch, and it's, I don't know, the mutant society you have to see.
I recommend, at least for the first half, doing something else while you're watching it though, because it will
do
be
your laundry.
It'll be a bit boring otherwise. But yeah.
Have it in the background while you're cooking food.
Yeah.
It's definitely a Saturday morning watch.
Yeah. So there you go. That is Beneath the Planet of the Apes. If you made it this far in the review, you can put the word Alpha and Omega into the comments. Alpha and Omega.
Alpha, Omega, the Doomsday Bomb.
The Doomsday Bomb. Put that in the comments to let us know that you made it to the end. You can, of course, do a bunch of other stuff. Before anything else, though, I have 2 things I need to do. One, I have to tell you what's coming next week, and I actually didn't check this in advance, so I'm going to go and open that as I stall for time, as I keep talking.
I certainly don't have anything to say right now. So I can't stall.
It's a pro move. All right, so next week we're actually doing the recent vote winner from Patreon, which is What Happened to Monday. So we're checking out a Netflix movie starring Numi Rapice 7 times.
I have no idea what this is, but it's probably bad.
Oh, preconceived notions. Task number 2, Tara needs to do her pose for the thumbnail. So,
Oh boy.
lean back a little bit, top of your head can't be cut off, or just tilt the camera up, yeah. Whatever fancy sciencey way you want to do it. And I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1 and say pose, and Tara's going to pose for her part of the thumbnail.
I'm going to get my hair out of the way because it's bad for thumbnails for you. More work.
It's not actually that bad, because the soft brush goes quite well with the hair, and you can sort of just rough it out a little bit. You don't have to be as precise. There you go. All right. 3, 2, 1, pose. Does that sum up your feelings in the movie, Tara? That look there, that shrugging sort of like, it's a movie.
I have a smile.
True. Yes, there you go. You can of course like on YouTube. Liking is very important. It helps us out a lot because it lets the YouTube algorithm know that you think we're worth spreading out to other people who might enjoy what must be close to 90-minute discussion of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And those people exist. They're out there, and we want to find them. So please do like the video on YouTube.
Yep.
You can rate the video, or rate the podcast episode, or rate the podcast itself, I should say, on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. That helps out a lot as well. 5 stars. Give us a nice positive review, saying how amazing I am and how dashingly handsome I sound, and just all these things. No?
I mean, please give a rating of 5 stars, but then be honest.
About how dashingly handsome. Yes, I agree. We're on the same page here. So, do that. Of course, we mentioned earlier, you can support us via the monies, is of course patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you get some bonuses, of course, so go and have a look at that too. Helps keep all the content coming, and we love you loads if you do that. Tara, would you like to promote any other piece of MailFuzz TV content that you think people should check out?
Why, if you're a fan of Planet of the Apes, you're probably a fan of Rod Serling, and guess what? We are doing both the classic and the new Twilight Zone, so go check out those episodes and watch them with us. It's a blast. What are you doing?
I'm reacting. I'm like, why? I'm basically trying to do that thing like a commercial when like they have like an actor and to fake their reaction to like it's such a good deal. Like, oh, that's such good value.
2 Twilight Zone series at the same time? You bet.
Actually, do you know what it is? It's that scene from Arrested Development where Tobias has been trying to get a commercial, and he tries the fire sale line so many times, and then Lindsay just shows up and says, wait, so-and-so's having a fire sale? And like, we'll hire you. And Tobias is emasculated yet again.
Oh. Tobias is the best character maybe ever.
I don't know. That's a debate for another time. But this has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I think it's episode 73. I didn't check,
I have
but
no idea.
I think it's episode 73. Better news, we are planning doing a countdown episode in about a month or so's time. Sometime in August, we're going to record a countdown, a top 10, I think.
That should be fun.
Yeah, you should see what that's like. So look forward to that. Otherwise though, I think that's us. We're done. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction, guys. And computer, that's Elsa.
Glory be to the bomb and to the holy fallout. Amen.